Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I am excited to share this conversation today that I recorded with my friend, Martha Alter Hines. You may know that Martha has been on the podcast before. I've also collaborated with Martha on this beautiful symposium that she has been organizing the past couple of years called Rebecoming the One. The reason why I wanted to have Martha over for this conversation is because Martha is teaching a year-long astrology immersion. It's actually part of a longer curriculum that she is preparing to teach astrology. And Martha is, to me, a very special human, a very special friend, a very special astrologer and energy worker. Our works are connected through this beautiful interweaving of energy work and astrology. And I deeply appreciate Martha's presence, Martha's perspectives, and there was something in our conversation, the last conversation that I recorded with Martha, where she talked about the transit. And I don't remember the exact details of what she said, but it just resonated so deeply with me. And in some ways, looking back, I think that was one of the moments that really encouraged me on a deep level to share my perspectives on the astrology as well as the energy of the week on the podcast weekly every Monday. So in that sense, Martha, as a colleague and as a friend, she's really helped me find my own voice. And so I'm excited to share her perspectives. I'm excited to amplify her work. And for those of you who are interested in learning with, from, and alongside Martha, her course called Infinite Soul Wisdom Astrology 101 course and Sacred Journey is going to begin on January 25th, 2024. And so if you resonate with Martha's presence, with her voice and her story, I highly recommend that you check that out and reach out to Martha if you have any questions. All the links will be in the show notes below. All right, without further ado, this is my conversation with Martha Alter Hines. Welcome, Martha. Thank you for being back here. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. I feel like lifetimes have passed since the conversation we recorded together for this podcast. And we've also kind of grown in terms of like our friendships, the things we were doing together. So it just feels so exciting for me to be here with you because it's almost like we get to like go deeper and we get to, almost like, I feel like I'm sure your approach has really evolved in the past few years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's only been 1 year.
It's only been one.
It's been 1 year since the last time I talked on your podcast.
Wow.
But yes.
Wow. It feels like a while, actually. That's hilarious. Well, I mean, I am a Pisces sun. Sometimes my timing is funny, but anyways, I was thinking about how to start this conversation. And what's really coming up for me is I'm curious to hear you talk about your relationship with astrology, actually. I'm curious to hear about how you started learning astrology. Did you grow up being really interested in astrology, or did you find it at a very important point in your life? And yeah, wherever that question takes you.
Sure. Yeah, I did not grow up with astrology at all. I grew up, as you know, largely either in South Asia or surrounded by South Asian culture, like
Mm,
Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi culture. So I would say there's a lot of layers of relationship with spirit world that have always been with me, but I didn't know anything about astrology until college. And then and then in college I got really interested in astrology for a little while. This is in the late 90s.
mm,
Um and then I learned something about the zodiac. So I learned how to, so that was the late 90s. So I learned how to create charts by, by hand on paper and all of that. And um and then I learned something about there being different versions of the zodiac. And I didn't even know very much in detail about it. I just,
mm,
the very sciencey brain of me suddenly realized, oh, wait a second, there's major nuance and discrepancy in the ways that this can be approached. And suddenly it just all shut off in me, even though I was actually very spiritually oriented also.
mm.
um, for whatever reason, I didn't, I was, my interest just kind of died for a moment.
Yeah,
For the next
yeah.
like 20 years. No, not 20 years, but 15 years or so.
Hmm.
And then it was just several years ago, I was having a really profound personal experience. And my cousin, who's really into evolutionary astrology, said to me, "You know what's going on in the sky right now? There is actually an eclipse, and Mars and Venus are opposite each other."
Mm,
And I said, "Oh, okay. What does that mean?" And what was so interesting was that this was a relationship issue, right? So with me, with a masculine person, um, and my praying, I had been getting shown a feminine figure opposite, like looking at, like facing a masculine figure, like a light figure. And there was something really important about this dynamic, about this two lights opposite each other, not opposite in a antagonistic way, just like
mm.
the polarities of them,
Yeah.
which was mirrored then when my cousin said, "You know what? Actually, in the sky, Mars and Venus, which we can think of if we want to, as feminine and masculine, are opposite each other, facing each
Right.
other, and it's an eclipse. So it's really, really powerful moment astrologically." So that was like the spark. That was the catalyst that got me going, wait a second, hang on. And then then I dove in from there, and I realized, long story short, that like what really kept hooking me was that I kept noticing that I would go into my praying and I would be getting shown things energetically that when I looked at the astrology were actually mirrored in what was going on astrologically.
Hmm.
And then I went, wait a minute, there's something here. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's incredible. I love how you're approaching it from that intuitive place, and that almost seems to me like that's like the foundation for you, and then the astrology was supportive to the intuitive guidance that you were receiving. Yeah. Uh-huh.
exactly.
Yeah. Um it's interesting because I feel like in some ways when I think about my own journey, it's maybe a little less um neatly tied together, but I also feel like one is kind of incomplete without the other. There's kind of a way in which when I am receiving intuitive guidance, I'm sometimes literally, because maybe it's the language I speak and I'm fluent in, I'm asked to go into the chart, and then the chart can kind of really anchor some of those intuitive knowings about the person, and even maybe even open up some avenues or channels or pathways wasn't that weren't previously available if I were just maybe in that, you know, guidance channel, right? I'm
Definitely.
curious to hear more about your relationship with the intertwining of your intuitive gifts and your training and your experience being a healer, an energy worker, and astrology.
Yeah, yeah, actually, and I feel like the two are all of a sudden like colliding in a whole new way, which is really
Mm.
exciting and fun.
Mhm.
Um, and I would throw in there also my a lot of grounding in being a psychotherapist and a clinical social worker, right? So that's like maybe more of my Virgo groundedness in there too. But this Piscean stuff in me um, is so strong too. And what I feel happening now actually is I uh, I had my Uranus opposition a year and a half ago,
Mm.
and now I have Uranus coming to my Jupiter, and I'm feeling this incredibly powerful um, influence of that Uranian energy, actually. And it's like it feels like it's just I'm in the middle of this really powerful uh like it's like Uranus is just taking all of that, like me as a therapist, psychotherapist, me as energy healer, me as an astrologer, me as just me who I am. And also I think this moment in time on our planet, it's like coming all together all at the same time, and probably the needs of lots of people on the planet who maybe I'm
Mm.
here to be serving or holding space for.
Mhm.
It's it feels like it's all suddenly converging, like and it's um so it's so powerful, and it's actually happening minute by minute at the moment.
Yeah.
So I feel like you could catch me in another 2 weeks and I
Uh-huh.
could probably have a whole different narrative about it. But
Mm.
what's happening, it's like it's all coming alive in me suddenly as um everything as energy,
Mm.
everything as aliveness, like the planets, the asteroids, the earth, ourselves, our souls, our spirits, the sun, the galaxies, all of it, the whole time space continuum and beyond is literally alive, right? And literally
Yes.
energy. That's
Mhm.
what we are. That's what everything is.
Mhm.
And so it's suddenly clicking in my body. It's like it's Uranus in Taurus coming to my Jupiter in Taurus, right? It's like, oh my God. And I feel all this electric energy just going through my whole being,
Yeah.
um, which is actually really fun,
Mhm. Mhm.
enjoying it. Um, yeah. So I
Yeah.
could say so much more on that, but that's the gist. Yeah.
Wow. I feel like, I mean, we're also right now talking under an eclipse. So I
Yes.
feel like there is definitely
Exactly.
an added injection of cosmic steroid into
Yeah.
this collapsing timelines.
Yes, 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 exactly. And it's my precise to the minute nodal reversal.
Right now.
To the minute. Yes. So my nodes are 2452 Aries and Libra. And right now the nodes are 2452 Aries. So
Well, I'm glad we caught each other at this auspicious timing, Martha.
I know. Yeah,
That
exactly.
is incredible.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm forgetting, or I forgot until you mentioned that your Jupiter is in Taurus, which is in your ninth house, right? Is that right? In
Yes.
Porphyry? Yeah. So, um, and because, we're both Virgo risings, that, thinking about Jupiter as like the teacher, the expander, the, cosmic brain, like juice injection as being like in your house of teaching is very, very apropos. Like I
Mhm.
feel like, okay, yes, I see you, Martha.
Yeah, I feel seen by you, Jonathan.
um, yeah, and I really kind of want to bring in too the reason why I felt compelled to have this conversation with you is because you are about to embark. It's not going to start until March 2024. Am I correct about that?
February, but yeah, March, yeah.
February 2024, but you're offering an astrology learning container that has the potential of being a 3-year situation, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, when I heard that, I was like, that sounds crazy. Like, I cannot hold that. My Gemini moon would be like, oh my God. But like when I tune into your offering, I was just so overwhelmed by, and I was telling you this before we recorded, I was so overwhelmed by like what I perceive intuitively as the driving force of your offering, which is this desire to serve people, you know? And it's so potent in your work. And I think that not only do you have that desire, but you also have the skills. And I think the
Mm.
marriage of those two is like chef's kiss, you know? And so
Mm.
this is jumping a little bit, but I kind of want to. I was wondering actually, one question I had um, was there a specific reason why you're starting this course next year? In terms
Yes.
of this intertwining of your intuitive guidance and astrology for you.
Yeah, yes. The whole thing is basically channeled.
Mm,
So uh, everything I do is essentially channeled. I mean, it's everything I do since 2018 um is because I'm told to do it in my brain.
mm,
But this, out of anything and everything I've ever done, I would say feels like the most powerfully held by the spirit world. It's like so as you know, because you were part of it twice, the Rebecoming the One symposium that I hosted and that you co-hosted with me partially this year,
mhm,
those were spirit led, spirit guided also, but this feels like that times like 10 or 100 or 1,000. This feels like when I was holding space for those symposiums, it felt like the spirit world was guiding me and moving through my body in a sense, like as I was holding that space. But this feels this feels like what the spirit world is saying to me is they show me them holding the whole container like an umbrella,
mhm,
humongous, like very powerful umbrella over the whole thing. And they say, just lean back, just get out of the way. We've got this. Right.
mhm,
So it feels like there was something that needed to move, certainly in the symposiums, that there was some the conversations that needed to be had, and lots of things that needed to move on a collective level, and in me personally, and probably in lots of individuals personally. But this feels like what I get shown and told is that for whatever reason, and this is not me talking, so I don't necessarily understand it cognitively, but
mhm,
what they say is this is a moment on the planet where we are needed to radically remember who we are on a soul level and radically bring back, ground in, and be held and supported to bring back the ancient knowing, the ancient wisdom that is each of us. That's the puzzle piece that is, we're all doing this together.
mhm,
So instead of it's like it feels like a humongous paradigm shift from looking to spiritual gurus out there who are going to bring through the wisdom for us to
mhm,
follow,
mhm,
to which is not necessarily always bad. I benefit from some of those people, but this is absolutely not that. This is a radical paradigm shift of being held and supported in a very grounded way very trauma informed way, to suddenly get it in ourselves, like the power that we are, the wisdom that we are each individually, uh, and to re-empower ourselves
Mm.
here and now, that wisdom is right here, and it's going to come through you, and it's going to come through you and you and you and you and you and you, right?
Yeah.
And we can't create, quote unquote, the new earth or whatever it is that we're here to be doing without these puzzle pieces coming through each of us. And if we keep giving our power away, it won't happen. And so this, like, I almost could cry. Like, it's like the spirit world is just adamant, like, you have to do this now. I
Mhm.
mean, not for everybody, but for people who feel that calling, like, now, this is the time now.
Mhm.
And there need to be safe spaces for people to, again, in a grounded way, feel held, because it can be so scary to let that wisdom come through. That's what this container is that they're holding, like that umbrella is meant to be like a safe container, very, very powerfully held by what I feel and see as these massive beings, these, many, many, many massive, powerful spirit beings holding the whole space for the whole thing.
Mm.
And then people can just come in, can rush in and just be held under that. So yeah, it's like so beyond anything I've ever done or felt or experienced, or I'm just kind of in awe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really excited for you and for everybody who's drawn to this container. I'm curious to hear if you feel like sharing. Tell us more about what you mean by remembering our true nature.
Mm, yeah. Um, so again, the spirit world says that this container is like a portal of remembering. Um, and so what I feel and see, okay, I could start crying again, but okay, I would say not not all, but maybe 80 to 90% of my clients, for whatever reason, seem to be people who identify as women who are in their 60s and 70s, for example, right? Like, probably the average person who seems to be drawn to me for whatever reason is like a 67-year-old woman identified person, human,
Mhm.
who has lived their life primarily in service of other people, right? And they're very empathic and they're very giving. And maybe they've been married or in a partnership, or they've had children, or they've had children, and they've had a career, or whatever, or not, or whatever, some version of they've given their life to other people. And yet there's like this part of them that suddenly is going, wait a minute, I am here on this planet. I have probably maybe, 20, 30, maybe 40 years of life left, or whatever it is, or 10 years, or whatever. There's something so much more that's me, and it's needed. And I don't even know where to start, of, how to find that, how to be that, what do I do with that? Am I meant to even do anything with it?
Mm.
And so I talk to like person after person after person after person who is drawn to work with me. And a lot of people have already signed up for this course, right? And the people who have signed up are, I can't even believe it, really, honestly, how amazing these humans are. Um, and it's like, I think people of any gender, but I would say maybe you could speak this too, but it feels like especially maybe people who have been identified as female have grown up, having needing to hide themselves. But
Mhm.
maybe it's true for any gender.
Mhm.
Um, and so now, like this morning, I had somebody emailing me saying, "What do you think of such and such and such about a planet, a particular planet?" And she was referencing the opinion of a white male astrologer about this planet. And she said, what do you think about so-and-so's opinion of XYZ thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I completely disagree, actually, with the opinion of that white male astrologer about this thing. But I could hear it, that this woman, again, another, woman in her 70s who's dedicated her life to other people, I could feel it. I could hear it in there somewhere, that she has some very powerful wisdom of her own
Mm-hmm.
about this thing she was asking me about.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to her, because I know her pretty well. So I said, honestly, that person, that man could be correct. I won't say he's not. And yet, what is really important to me is that we each have the space, we're held to remember our own knowing in ourselves, the power of our own wisdom
Mm-hmm.
with regard to all of these beings. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So she wrote me back and she said, well, yeah, I actually don't agree with him. Here's what I feel. And it was she relating it to her own life and these incredibly powerful experiences that she's had. And I felt like she was spot on, at least with regard to her own knowing of herself, right? And
Yes.
so this white male opinion was drastically different from her own opinion about herself.
Mm-hmm.
And do you see what I'm saying? So it's like
Yes.
that right there, that
Yeah.
I can go on, but I think you get the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What really struck me about everything you're sharing, Martha, is that to me, it almost feels like part of this remembering, and especially maybe for the group of people, these women that you tend to work with, is there is a piece about reclaiming the reality that one's lived experiences and one's deep knowing that is rooted in one's lived experiences are actually, this is going to sound so grandiose, but it's like the portal to the wisdom of the universe, you know?
Literally. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part two to I was just realizing, wait a second, that was sort of part one. And yes, then there's part two, which is, so there's the part one, which I just named, which is, in this moment, I'm feeling XYZ wisdom about myself.
Mm.
And I'm trained to kind of look to an outer, especially white male authority to tell me whether I'm correct or not about myself. There's that whole narrative. But even bigger is exactly what you're saying, which is, yes, what the spirit world is really saying is that we are each literally portals to the wisdom of infinity, each in our own unique ways, right? Like you're a musician, so probably maybe you and I have both used this metaphor together. I can't remember, but I
Mm.
think of astrology so much as song and music, right? And
Yeah.
all of life as song. So we each are actually in one of my books, the Gaia Speaks book, which is channeled, the Gaia speaks about ourselves as tuning forks
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
how, anyway, Gaia Speaks is basically about clearing yourself so that you can clear the gunk off of the tuning fork that you are. And then when the divine strikes your tuning fork, you can be the song of the divine that is you. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah. So it's like, so if we are each that beautiful, perfect tuning fork of the divine, that's what we are needed to be, is that the song that is meant to sing like through literally all of infinity and to resonate as infinity, as me, as you, right? And yeah, so that's the big thing, is that I feel like, and I'm getting chills, it's like again, I could start crying because I'm thinking again of some of these women who have even already signed up for this course. And it's not actually, it's not only women and it's not only people in their 60s and 70s, just to be clear,
Yes.
um but these people are so powerful and they kind of have an inkling of it, but they don't quite get it. But I can see it and I can feel it, and I can feel, like they'll say to me, yeah, I have these visions of XYZ thing, and I'm starting to remember my past lives as blah 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 in such and such place, and I can feel it that I was a wisdom keeper. I was a, you know, insert in blank, like powerful being, and
Hmm.
I can see that in them absolutely. And I said, yes, that yes, exactly. So through patriarchy, through violence, through oppression, colonialization, all of it, as we know, that part of us has been suppressed,
Hmm.
um, and continues to be suppressed. And so the point is, we don't need to be suppressed, right? We have the ability. The space is meant to be, and I think in your work too, I think something I love about you so much is that you really hold such a safe space for people's own wisdom, own being to be present,
Hmm.
um, and to just relax and let that old conditioning, well, all of it, just let it go.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this piece around like shoulding ourselves is actually like the first tool for oppression,
yes,
like
exactly,
literally, right? Because that layer of should is what stops you from trusting whatever is emerging in the moment, and it's really hard to try to listen to that when you're also shoulding yourself, when you're like, I should be doing this or I should be doing that, right? And it's like, it's been really fascinating, Martha, I think in my own practice, what I see, because I tend to serve a lot of people who are queer or people who are creative, but some of them are not always affirmed in their creativity. Like that
yeah,
tends to be something that I see over and over again in my client world. And in some ways, I think it's very similar to yours, like the people who come to you, because there's a sense of like, I know there's a deeper well of wisdom within me, and I don't know how to channel it, and something I've been thinking about a lot recently is how my intention and my hope for my spaces is for people to start allowing their inner teacher to come online,
mm,
because that part is so hard, right? And you're right, Martha. I think there's something about crafting or tuning to that frequency that can help people feel and access safety
mm,
within their bodies, in the containers, that actually starts to allow some of that to happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. And it's like, maybe filtered through our Virgo rising beings, it's like the organization, like, where the bathroom is, where the fridge is, so where to get snacks, right? Like metaphorically speaking. But yeah, I really appreciate what you were saying about safety, because I do feel like oftentimes it's so hard for us to listen to our own knowing when we don't feel safe within ourselves.
Yes,
Hmm.
exactly.
Hmm. What have you found to be true in terms of the role that astrology plays in cultivating more of that safety, which then leads to the remembering?
Hmm. Well, the thing that's coming to mind, I'm sure there's probably a lot of answers to that question for me, but
Hmm.
certainly, for sure, I see it as a tool of affirming for people their gifts. Yeah.
Mm. Hmm.
I mean, you could look at any chart and find gifts there. So it's like not hard.
Yes.
uh, but uh I mean, anyway, I had sessions with two people today where that was absolutely part of what I used the astrology for was, oh wow, yep, there it is. Yes, what you're
Hmm.
naming in yourself that you feel is there and you can't quite grasp. Okay, here's what the astrology reflects.
Hmm.
Like, yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. I'm reflecting back to you what you're saying. Yes.
Mm. Hmm.
And here, let me flesh it out a little. Like here the astrology can kind of add to the story a little
Yeah.
and, take what resonates and leave the rest, right? And then of course both of them were like, yes, that's exactly how I feel. Right. Um, yeah, so I'd say that's probably number one
Hmm.
coming to my mind.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
probably could affirm it for them without looking at the astrology, but the astrology gives me another language and it helps to ground it and I think it helps, honestly, people feel like it's more real if
Mm.
I'm looking at their chart.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
True. True. Yeah. I think there's also something really magical about people having learned astrology, even if they don't then go on to maybe offer astrology readings, that they then have this ability to kind of uh, dilate or open to like this wisdom. You know that like if I have been learning astrology, right, and I come to you for an astrology reading, there's a different level of receptivity, to the information
Yeah.
that I think is
Mhm.
also really potent. And do you also find in your client practice that working with transits over time can really help people?
For sure. I mean, absolutely. Yes. And so kind of, yeah, two parts to my brain at this moment. Um, yes, I can come back to that exact question, but related to transits and the natal chart, both, I'm recognizing one other way I feel like the relationship to astrology helps with the safety issue,
Mm.
um, is in the framing of the astrological energies. So like I'm thinking of Saturn, for example. I've been thinking a lot about Saturn today personally. And Saturn at this moment we're recording, is at 0 degrees of Pisces where it's gonna go direct in
Mhm.
a few weeks. And so I've been feeling so much powerful energy in the the aspect of Saturn going direct at 0 degrees of Pisces have for me having so much to do with radical forgiveness.
Mm.
So like as and I think a lot of us talk about, Saturn can be approached in so many different ways. Saturn
Mhm.
is typically called a bad planet or a difficult planet or whatever.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people will come to a reading and say, oh, Pluto is doing this to me and Saturn is doing this to me. And because Pluto is another one that we often think of as being really difficult. So then when I'm able to sit with a person and hold space for their concern or their anxiety or their fear or their grief or whatever it is that they're feeling in that, and at the same, like, not deny that, and yet then also reframe it.
Mm.
Again, I feel like the astrology isn't what's the cure, but it's astrology somehow gives a grounding, like a three-dimensional object almost to hold on to, that that can help the reframing to happen. So when I was a
Mhm.
psychotherapist and I wasn't
Mhm.
an astrologer, a huge amount of what I did with people was reframing of their cognitive emotional perception of things
Mm.
and approach
Mhm.
to things, right? But I
Mhm.
didn't have the tool of astrology. So I know what it's like to do that reframing with and without it.
Mhm.
And for sure, it is so much easier to do it with it. With a client who is into astrology. I mean, I wouldn't
Right.
do it with somebody who doesn't believe in astrology.
Yes.
But yeah, it's this really beautiful tool. It's like because I mean, I have to feel into why, but partly I think it's because we can have a relationship with this thing like
Mhm.
Saturn, right? It can become
Yes.
our friend. It can become
Mhm.
this wise, loving being, which it literally is for us sometimes. And then we can externalize it and have a narrative with it that is outside of ourselves, and that helps us to, anyway, I could go in like psychobabbly theory about why I think that might be, but um anyway, for whatever reason it feels really really helpful and soothing, and yeah, that we just have that ability to help people reframe their lives
Mhm.
through the lens of astrology.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I definitely was really surprised because in my own training, when I was training for integrative hypnosis, one of the things they talk about was actually that you need to dissociate people from their problem. You need to. So the first step is to kind of hook them in to like where is the problem? You know, when was the last time you felt this trigger, right? And then you go into dissociation, and then once you reconstruct it, it was almost like that feeling is uh, your relationship with that feeling of trigger has changed, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of the template, I guess, of that change work. And yeah, I feel like astrology just provides such a beautiful, that part about dissociating or like it's not even dissociating, I think, because dissociating kind of gets a bad rap in our culture nowadays. But it
Externalize.
yeah, externalizing, I think it also reaches deeper into this collective bank of knowing and memory
Mm.
and I don't know. It's like this collective well of something else, that people are not even aware of sometimes that they have within them. Hmm.
Yes, yes, all of the above. And I feel so much more even there that I can't quite feel or articulate or grasp yet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm really glad you also brought up this piece around having been a psychotherapist and then now doing astrology, right? Even though I'm sure you're still bringing in all the skills and all the knowing and the experience that you had working in that capacity. But I suppose I have a curiosity to hear you speak more about that in terms of like how astrology is different than psychotherapy, and yet astrology can maybe achieve some things that psychotherapy as a modality may struggle with, and vice versa. Mm.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to state very clearly that I'm not doing psychotherapy when I'm working with people now, just to be super, super clear.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and yes, I do bring those skills for sure. And I have a lot of those skills, but it's not psychotherapy. Um,
Yeah.
but I actually did a whole conversation with Heather Ensworth and her partner Christina Lee about this whole topic. If anybody's interested, it's on Heather's YouTube channel,
Hmm.
where we when I found Heather, something that was absolutely life changing meeting Heather, because she also is she's a psychologist, she's a psychotherapist and an astrologer and a shamanic practitioner. And
Hmm.
so we both Heather used to work just as a psychologist, and she worked largely with at one point with um, even people hospitalized with extreme mental illness and schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera. And I worked in the child welfare system, so with very extreme cases of child abuse and all of that, right? And we've both done it in a very traditional psychotherapeutic way. And then now we're both doing astrology, but with this background of that traditional psychotherapeutic way of being. Um, and I bring in also my background as a body worker and an energy healer, and then she
Mm.
brings in her background as the shamanic practitioner. Okay, so when I found her, she was the first person I had ever met who both is a grounded psychotherapist and is incorporating spirit, um, earth, all of the above, like ourselves as souls, ourselves as heart, ourselves as body, ourselves as spirit, ourselves as emotion, our all of the things,
Mm.
ourselves as the brain, all of it. And I had been getting told in my own praying, when I was told by the spirit world to leave social work in 2019, I was essentially shown and told, yeah, you the psychotherapy world is great, and it has so many good tools and it absolutely helps people, and that's not your role anymore. You need
Mm.
to be step way back and be in a place where you can hold space for the healing of basically the totality of all of existence. That sounds really extreme, but what I mean is like is that psychotherapy focuses so much on research-based, like in the psychotherapy world, the things that are valued are things that can be quote unquote proven through research, right?
Yeah.
Which is really hard to do when you're talking about emotions. Like, how are you going to quantify emotional wellness?
Totally.
That's really, really, to me, honestly, again, it gets into the whole colonization world. It's like we're trying to like quantify and strategize and measure, people's emotions. That's really tricky to me. Yeah. So that's a whole conversation. But then even taking a step back from even that conversation is the reality that in the psychotherapy world, even if I had a client who was very spiritually oriented, I wasn't allowed to talk about spirits. I wasn't allowed to, talk about astrology. No way, none of it, right? So there are all these tools of who I was that I had to just, I literally had what I would say is my spiritual side, which I talked to maybe 5 people in the world about, my very closest friends, my mother, my best friend, like maybe 4 or 5 people, period, until 2018. And then was my therapist side, my social work side. So I had to literally split myself in order to do my job. So I wasn't bringing all of me to my clients, which sucked for me. And probably, I feel like I did some good work with them, but anyway, you get the idea. And I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with all of that?
I think the question that I was posing was, you answered it perfectly, which is, what have been some of the what are some of the challenges you perceive in terms of what astrology can provide that psychotherapy can't, and vice versa?
Yes. Yeah. And again, I would definitely say anybody who really wants like a really in-depth conversation, go see the interview with Heather and Christina Lee and me. But yeah, on a basic level, I feel like traditional psychotherapy addresses maybe at the most like a third of who we actually are, which is perfect, wonderful for people who that is what they need. And then for people who happen to be spiritually oriented in this way, it's missing most of what we need. Yeah.
I'm curious to talk more with you about your astrological lineage. You mentioned that you practice evolutionary astrology mostly, grounded in the lineage of Jeffrey Wolf Green, and I'm really curious to just hear your relationship with it, honestly. Like how are you finding this particular lineage? What do you find so helpful in learning and then applying this to your own life and the lives of clients?
Yeah, and again, I would say I'm in the middle of this massive, Uranus kind of hovering around my Jupiter. I think I'll have the exact conjunction next year. So interview me again in a year. And
we'll do that.
Totally different conversation. It's so fast, so interesting to me. I feel less and less and less and less like I can say that I'm truly an evolutionary astrologer. I don't even think I can say that anymore. I think what would be more accurate is to say at this moment would be to say I am trained quite deeply with Ari Moshe Wolf, who was a student of Jeffrey Wolf Green.
Yeah.
And so I know Ari's approach to astrology very well. And it's what I'm rooted in. It's what that's the way to say it. It's what I'm rooted in is the evolutionary, the Jeffrey Wolf Green through Ari Moshe Wolf. approach to astrology. And then I also studied with Heather Answorth for a year. So, and she and I are good friends, and we've had a lot of conversations. And I would say she and I are on the same page more than most people, and more than most astrologers for me. But even Heather and I probably have some differences. I can't identify what they are, but I am really, I guess it's walking my own talk. It's like I really feel strongly that we each need to have our own relationship to all of these beings and all these celestial beings, right? And our own relationship to the cosmos and our own relationship to life.
Yeah.
And so I'm not very good at quote unquote following a lineage. It doesn't work for me very well. It's like, I don't know. I have my Mars in Aquarius, which is opposite my Saturn in my 11th house, which is both are squared by my Uranus. Does that give you a picture?
Yeah. I love this so much, Martha, because I just feel, yeah, I totally resonate with that. And I really relate to that because in some ways, I too, my background has been, and my education is really rooted in traditional astrology. But traditional astrology is really funny. And I think evolutionary astrology is maybe also kind of coming to this point in terms of people practicing it, where I feel like with traditional astrology, because there's such a gap between this current culture we're in and where people were coming from, it's like really fascinating to learn all the history, right? And to understand where all of this is coming from. And I think that really informed my practice in a deep way. But I even noticed for myself, I don't have some of the same intention and interests as some of these older astrologers, you know? So we're not even really using astrology in the same way. So I really resonate with what you were saying. And you also mentioned this in the page for your course offering, which is that many of us who are called to this work need to find our own connection to it and our own relationship with it. And for us, for example, what I'm seeing is that it's so, the interrelation of astrology and all these other modalities that we are fluent in really plays a huge role in how that disrupts the linear narrative of how astrology is supposed to be practiced.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And again, as you know, in the Rebecoming the One symposium, I interviewed a lot of astrologers. I interviewed a lot of non-astrologers too, but I interviewed astrologers from all different areas of astrology, all different backgrounds of astrology. And I loved it so much, right? I loved, and I really especially love interviewing astrologers who are totally out of the box. Like I'm thinking of this one. I mean, the interview you and I did 2 years ago about Mercury is an example of that, right? Like of just like exploring it in your own beautiful way. Like, what is Mercury? And I'm thinking of this other, actually, you connected me with her, Ada Pembroke.
I don't
You
know if I
connected me
connected
to her from.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you didn't. Anyway,
maybe it was someone else.
Well, anyway, okay. Well, anyway, Ada, she did this. Oh my God, amazingly. She's a poet. She's a beautiful writer and an astrologer. And this interview is actually still on my YouTube channel if anybody's interested. It's so beautiful. Highly recommend it. But she's talking about I can't remember the exact, but it was like Venus and the moon. It's like being just flipping around the gender associations we have with Venus and the moon in particular, and how in ancient, was it maybe Babylonian? I can't remember, but something. It was just so incredibly like mind bending, but done in this beautifully held poetic way. And it's like, oh my God, yes, exactly, right? Like we don't necessarily need to believe any one particular way, but to I feel like it's like this need to exercise all of our muscles, all of our selves to, it feels like I grew up around the world. You and I both grew up in all different parts. Well, I grew up in various parts of the world,
Yeah.
and we both have really international backgrounds. And so for me, it's similar. It's like, and maybe it's my Jupiter in my ninth house also, right? Like I want to hear and understand all different ways, because there can't possibly be one truth. Like there can't possibly be like only one way that's correct. That can't be a thing. It's just,
Yes.
I mean, maybe in some ultimate sense, but it cannot possibly be true that Jeffrey Wolf Green has the truth. And I don't even think he would want to be thought of. That's my guess about him.
No, I
Yeah.
don't think so either.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so at all. And certainly would never want to be thought of as that way. And I'm guessing you wouldn't want to be thought of as that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think that this is also where we can start to collect really interesting data, right, about astrology and how it impacts our lives, or our relationship with astrology, by kind of expanding the way that we engage with it, and I think there's something about, I really like what you were saying earlier about your course and about your approach, which is that astrology is like a portal, is kind of what you say, or something like that. And I really, really appreciate that, because something that I've been thinking a lot about is how I am not interested in the kind of astrology that becomes a destination. I'm interested in the astrology that is a portal, right? Because so often people are like, tell me the end, but it's like, even, and this is maybe just my personality, but like, I am the kind of person who like reads spoilers all the time. I do not care about the ending. I care about how we get there. The experience of getting to the ending is the fun part. So, yeah, I really appreciate your approach. I guess I'm curious to hear more about the structure of this offering. If you want to share a little bit about like how you're thinking of structuring it, because I feel
Yeah.
like you have such a beautiful, sensibility around holding containers and creating experiences where people feel held. So yeah, would you want to say more about the structure of this
Thank you.
offering?
Yeah. Well, I feel like you do too. So maybe that's our Virgo energies coming
Yeah.
together. But, yes. So the whole thing is spirit led and spirit directed, and the vision of it is entirely from the spirit world.
Mm.
So I was told very specifically and very clearly how to do this. So the way it is going to be held is that it starts officially in February of 2024, but there are a couple of things that are leading up to it. And so anyway, like I won't go into all of that necessarily, but there's some free things for people who sign up before then, and that kind of lead into it. But the actual official start is February 2024, and it's going to start with a workshop that is going to be called The Soul and the Anatomy and the Soul of the Cosmos. So I'm going to start with an overview in this workshop of the different parts of our solar system, like the main planets, the asteroid belt, the outer planets, the Kuiper belt, and the Oort cloud, and then I'm going to go into, this is going to be kind of like a parallel to the whole way that the course is going to be held, which is we'll do the cognitive stuff, where I'll teach the astronomy. Like, here is what NASA would say about the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud, and here's what they are, right? But then the real point is, and I will say, astrologers often talk about the function of the inner planets as this, the function of the asteroid belt as this, et cetera, et cetera. But then the real point is, then I'm going to hold space for a channeled, guided experience for us to actually to travel through the whole solar system, to be with the sun, to be the sun, to be with ourselves as Earth, ourselves as, these inner planets, the personal planets. Then we get to the asteroid belt, which is between Mars and Jupiter, right? And then we get to the outer planets, and then we get to Pluto, which is the beginning of the Kuiper belt. And then we go to the Oort cloud, right? And so it's a matter of like, these are actual places. These are actual beings, which I think we often forget, especially I feel like evolutionary astrology sometimes forgets, or I have forgotten when I'm really in the evolutionary astrology world, I have forgotten these are actual physical things. Like Saturn is an actual physical thing in the sky, in the cosmos.
Yes.
And in addition, I would add on, not only is it a physical thing, it is an alive being. It is part of life, of existence. So that first workshop, which will be it's either actually, well, anyway, that'll be the very first official part of the course, is going to be, again, kind of like a grounding into the reality that we are alive in concert with the life of this whole cosmos, the anatomy and the soul of the cosmos.
Yeah.
And then from there, the container is really going to be, there are going to be 4. It's kind of like the pillars. They're going to be, so it's like the container, like I said before, is held by the spirit world like this umbrella. But then they show these 4 pillars throughout the year, which are ceremonies that I will hold around the time of the equinoxes and the solstices. And so those pillars are going to be times where the spirit world is, again, holding the space for this portal of remembering, right? So it's really, we will be learning astrology, and I'll get to that part in a second. We'll be learning astrology for sure in this portal of remembering, but the point of it really is the structure that's grounded and held to be that portal of remembering. And so what they show me is that those ceremonies at each of those equinoxes and solstices throughout the year are really key times for the real ultimate point of the course, which is not even, I wouldn't even necessarily call it a course. It's more of like a sacred journey. But then, so the first of those ceremonies will be around the equinox in March. But starting in March, starting with the sign of Pisces, we are going to go month by month through the year, where we will focus on the sign, the zodiac sign, associated with whatever new moon happens to be happening in that month. So in March, there's going to be a new moon in Pisces, and I'm very specifically starting with Pisces because I feel called to start with Pisces, but for me, Pisces is the beginning and the end, right? So like we could start with Aries, that would be logical, but Aries comes out of Pisces, and it feels really important to me that we start with the everything and the nothing, which is what Aries comes out of. So in each month, starting in March, we will focus on that month's sign. So in the month of March, Pisces, and then the planet or the planets that go with that sign. So in that month, it'll be Jupiter and Neptune. And then the other part of it that's super exciting and cool to me is that there are going to be 4 guest speakers who, again, were very specifically told to me by the spirit world needed to be these particular people. And one of them is Chris Skidmore, who it kind of goes back to the whole thing of, finding, being open to all different approaches to astrology. So Chris has a very powerful, strong personal relationship with mythology, and specifically with Greek mythology, which I don't. I don't personally, I haven't until now, really resonated that strongly with Greek mythology, because for me, it feels very patriarchal and very, there's just a lot in there that I don't necessarily resonate with. But when I connected with Chris, it was the first time I ever realized, wait a second, no. There's a totally different perspective here. Greek mythology and that Greek tradition has a deep sacred component to it, right? And Chris is very, very much tied in with that approach.
Yeah.
So he's going to be doing a monthly, we're calling it like a fireside chat with him, where he's going to go deeply into the mythology associated with the sign and the planets of that month. And I'm going to do more of I'll do the astronomy, the astrology, and that channeled guided way of coming back into relationship, like our own personal relationship with the planets and the signs. And he'll do the mythology part. And then the other three guest speakers are Heather Ensworth, Kelly Hunter, and Julia Balaz, who are just going to speak one time in the year. So it's like, I feel like they're part of what's holding that umbrella space. And they have their own very powerful relationships with astrology and with the cosmos and with their own soul wisdom in some particular way that's supposed to be part of this portal of remembering.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, there you go.
I love that. And then the second year would be more of a deep dive into chart analysis, right, and reading charts. And then the third year is more about becoming an astrologer and kind of like the business and space holding aspect of it. Is that accurate?
Year 2, I can't fully see yet, but it's going to be going more deeply into chart analysis and trauma-informed approaches to how do you hold space to read a chart? How do you how do you read a chart, number one? And number two, how do you read a chart in a way that's actually healing and safe for a person? Because that's so key, right? As we know. And then yes, year 3 is going to be, okay, so now you know how to read a chart, and you've found in year 1, maybe you found your own essence of your soul wisdom. Year 2, you deepened it. And now year 3 is me holding space for you to then have it manifest. It's the Saturn year, basically, right? It's like, now how can that manifest in the world and actually be of service in a very concrete, grounded way? Like, how do the people find you who need you, and blah, 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 all of that.
Beautiful. I'm curious if there's anything else that still feels alive for you that I maybe haven't asked, Martha, at this moment.
I'm just honestly feeling appreciation for you. And I'm feeling, like love, and like how much, like I'm feeling tenderness of how much you hold a similar energy in the world. And I've said this to you so many times, and all the interviews we've done and off camera too, just I appreciate so much in you how safe I feel, and how safe other people feel with you. And I just feel like I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I also feel similarly just so blessed and honestly like in awe of the work that you've been doing. You know, you've been building your work, and I feel like this course, this offering feels more than, I mean, Sacred Journey couldn't be a better word for it, you know? Like that's what it feels to me, because I think as I was really feeling into this offering, it felt to me like, like such a gift that is channeled through you. And I'm really excited to see how this is going to evolve your practice and also evolve the people who are in the container, because I think it's going to be massive. Yeah. It feels very alive for sure, this field.
Well, and I can add on one more thing that I'm feeling and thinking as I'm thinking about you and me in the next year. because we have Saturn stationing direct at 0 degrees of Pisces, right? And I think
Yes.
then this feels relevant just in general, which
Hmm.
is why I'm naming it now as opposed to waiting until after we're done recording.
Hmm.
But so something I've been feeling in myself as Saturn is stationing direct at 0 degrees of Pisces is this, like, suddenly, even today, the spirit world is saying to me, radical forgiveness is key. Radical forgiveness is key, not only just in general, just because it is, but and as we're moving forward in what it is that we're each called to do, like the structures, we're being called to bring into form. So we've Pluto just went direct in Capricorn, right? And it's doing this dance between Capricorn and Aquarius, and so it's deconstructing all these structures, right? And
Hmm.
then we have Saturn going direct at 0 degrees of Pisces, which to me feels like an energy of calling in what are these new structures going to be. It feels like at least partly that energy. So what I'm feeling what I've been getting told in my prayers even just today is, in order to move on to those structures that we're being called to bring into form,
Hmm.
a key component is something having to do with that radical letting go, the radical forgiving on every level. Not like cognitive forgiving, not like so and so did this to me and I am over it. Not
Hmm.
necessarily that. It's more
Hmm.
of an energetic, like literally letting go of the energetic of things that might be holding us back,
Yeah.
to then let that new form, the Saturn in Pisces, to truly show itself, right? So I'm thinking of
Hmm.
you and me specifically this coming year are going to both have Saturn coming to our sun, because we
Hmm.
have sun at the same place because we have almost the same birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're actually even going to have, we could talk about this another time, but we have Mars is going to be conjunct Saturn on our
Mm.
suns
Mhm. Mhm.
next year.
Mhm.
So I'm just thinking of that, like both of us are going to have this energy of something having to do with this Saturn structure trying to help us take form, right? Like create form in the way we're meant to shine in the world.
Yeah.
And yet there's something in this radical forgiving and the letting go and the, I don't know. So I'm bringing that up. I don't know if you have any reflections or anything that feels relevant to the audience, but
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the energy that I've been seeing actually a lot in terms of people who come to me, my own practice, and this continues for me to come back into Saturn and Pisces is, I don't know the lineage of energy work that you've done, but in the lineage that I learned, um, this idea of like releasing stories and
yes.
like we call them like frozen pictures from our aura, like releasing, and it's almost like, all this time, right? And especially with Saturn in Capricorn and Saturn in Aquarius, there has been a lot of like wearing on uh like really thick layers of jacket in order to protect ourselves, to like
Yes.
weather through the storm. And I think with Saturn and Pisces, it feels like taking them off, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like taking them off. And even like, I mean, just this past week, Martha, like this whole thing, like for me, right? And it's interesting thinking about for both of us, Uranus being on a ninth house, right? Like I have been doing such massive delayering around ideas of like what my teachers did to me, the ways that they have succeeded and they have failed, and like the ways I'm stepping into being a teacher, and just really like coming into like October 2023 of like,
Mm.
this is what I'm being called to show up as at this moment, and that to me, I mean, even the name of your course is, I love it. It's literally called Infinite Soul Wisdom Astrology. And yeah, the image I'm getting is like, I think part of that infinite soul wisdom for me is in remembering that at any given moment, like we are such multifaceted beings, right? Like, what does it mean to allow the moment by moment wisdom to speak to us, you know? Yeah, I'm curious actually. Maybe this is going to be my last question for you, which is, what does that word mean for you? Like, what is it bringing up when you were receiving infinite soul wisdom? What is that? Yeah, what is that lighting up for you?
Yeah, that brings me back to basically exactly what you're saying, which is that we are each literally infinity. We are infinite. We are the wisdom of every moment as a hologram of everything, right? And there's a need to both be grounded and held, and yet completely, radically, totally free
Mm-hmm.
every second
Mm-hmm.
to be exactly who we are, and to well, so again, in my praying, I've said this to you, I think, before, but so every day I get taken through the whole time space continuum and then outside of the time space continuum into the void.
Mm-hmm.
And then most days, and then I go into the void, and I've asked, what I am infinite. I am, no, I say, I am highest quantum source light. What is mine to do? And then typically I get taken outside of the time space continuum into the void. And then often what happens is I get exploded into nothing. I get exploded into infinity, like the ultimate Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, and so there's like, so in that's where I get shown we exactly what you're saying. We have to let go of the stories. And they'll have me just lie there and be infinity until I've let go of every single human story in my being, in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I just let go and let go and let go and let go and let go. And until I re-become infinity, which is what we are, because then it's in that place of being the nothing and the everything, the Pisces, that literally the wisdom of existence just is. It's there, and it's who we are, and we always have access to it. And we again, what they say is we have have to now be held in a way so we can have access to that. We can come back into that reality, and we can feel safe and held and have the freedom,
Mm-hmm.
give ourselves permission to be the nothing, the everything in our own ways, not necessarily in the way that I do it, but like in our own ways, that we are the wisdom of everything. Um, and it can only come back into our world, onto this planet, if we, again, essentially re-become that portal of that infinite soul wisdom that
Mm-hmm.
is us.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your just beautiful, exquisite relationship to um, the spirit world. And thank you for sharing it with us. Yeah.
Same to you, Jonathan.